Hello and welcome to Business India with me, Tarun. Power Minister Piyush Goyal has said time and again that time has come to phase out 25-year-old power plants. Not only are these power plants polluting, but they are also inefficient, and which eventually leads to higher cost of production. The minister also reiterated that the cost of upgrading old power plants goes to almost 60% of having a new power plant, and this eventually makes the whole project unviable and the whole exercise futile. At a time when 70,000 megawatt of power from new power plants can be fired up instantly, does it make sense to keep these old behemoths running? Joining me on the discussion are Mr. Praveer Sinha, CEO of Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited, a person who's got an experience of 30 years in the sector. He's spent about 20-25 years at the plant level before moving on to distribution. He'll give us a perspective from the generation angle, from the distribution angle. And Shakti Sinha, former Principal Secretary Power, the National Capital Territory of Delhi. He oversaw Delhi's reform from being a 52% AT&C loss city to 8.5% now. We'll start our debate with our first comment from Mr. Shakti Sinha. Yes, Mr. Sinha, what is your opening comment on this issue?
I think Mr. Goyal has raised a very, very important point.
Yes.
In addition to the fact that it's inefficient, these plants are very inefficient, they're very polluting, and therefore obviously it makes power expensive, is the fact that India has signed on to the Paris Pact on climate change. We are all committed to certain goals of bringing down the global temperatures. Now obviously with these old plants running, that adds another challenge. It's not just polluting in the sense of local pollution, in terms of the global impact also is there. So I think India has no options to my mind but to start shutting down these plants one by one.
Okay, I'm going across to Mr. Praveer Sinha. Sir, you spent a lot of time working and getting power plants ground up. You've also seen the new technology now, and now you work for the distribution side. What will be your opening comment on this issue?
I fully endorse whatever Mr. Shakti Sinha has said, that these plants are absolutely inefficient, they are frightfully expensive, and it doesn't make any sense, especially in light of the changes which are taking place in the world, the Paris Accord, and especially India's itself plan to have nearly 1 lakh megawatt of solar in next 6 years. And also the plan to have nearly 30% of our generation capacity by 2030 through renewable sources. So it makes a lot of sense if we go now for closing down these old plants, because that will create the space for these new renewable plants which have to come up, whether they are the solar plants or they are the wind energy projects or the biomass project. So something which is a necessity today, if we have to get large number of these renewable plants to come.
I'm going across to Mr. Shakti Sinha. Mr. Sinha, Mr. Piyush Goyal said that he has told the state governments across the country that ensure that you get these old power plants to shut shop or decommission them as soon as possible. But it's a funny situation where it was said around 36,000 megawatts of old capacity. The states who are willing to shut down said, okay, we can shut down 4,000 megawatt. But you've got a huge 32,000 megawatts still running. Do you think that's the issue?
Absolutely. You know, these are plants owned by the state governments. They have employees working for them. They have a full network around them.
Yes.
So while practically they should shut it down, absolutely. There's no reason why the country or that state itself should be saddled with these inefficient plants,
yes,
which are using good coal, producing bad quality power, expensive power, and polluting.
Yes.
So every which way they need to be shut down. But to take the decision to shutting it down and to opting for buying power is going to be very, very difficult for the state governments. Now, okay, please remember, electricity board unions are very, very strong unions.
Yes.
So, and your unions, see, at one place, concentrated. So, yes, it's very difficult for state governments
to convince them to shut down the plant?
To be able to shut down the plant.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Praveer Sinha, you worked at the plant level. Could you tell us how difficult it is to take such a decision?
These plants have to be shut down. The only challenge is that you don't shut down immediately, but shut down over a period of time. As far as the manpower is concerned, you go to any state electricity board, last many years they have not been recruited, and they have large number of vacancies with them. The people who will be asked to leave from this power plant will have to be redeployed in other areas of the business. of the utility in the state, and they should be to that extent given re-employment opportunities. Similarly, the plants which will be shut down can be used for putting up these new renewable plants which are going to come up. They have adequate land, they have water, they have other infrastructure facilities. Those should be leveraged to see that how we can provide renewable sources of power from those stations. And there also some of the people could be deployed. So it's not that we have to shut down lock, stock, barrel, but what we need to do is transition.
It needs to be transitionary, and slowly this 40,000 megawatts should be shut down is what Mr. Sinha is recommending. Okay, I'm going across to Mr. Praveer Sinha again. Mr. Sinha, I would want to ask you, there is about 40,000 megawatts of installed capacity in these old and polluting plants. Now, the central government and the Minister Piyush Goyal has said that I am not giving permission anymore to upgrade these old plants because it costs too much. New plants come in an area which is far lesser size and use clean coal in many instances, and at least are cleaner. Even if they use coal with high ash content, it's, you can't even compare it to the old plants. How would you see this transition happening? Because intent at the central level is one thing in India, but execution almost always happens at the states.
Well, many of these plants are also of central government generating stations like NTPC, DVC and others. Apart from that, there are large number of plants which are of the state government. And I think the cost at which we are getting alternate power, that means from the new generating stations, is much lower than the cost at which some of these old plants are operating. And just to give you a little perspective, the calorific value of or the heat rate of these old plants are something like 27-2800 kcal,
yes,
while the heat rate of the new plants are 23-2400. And if we go for critical plants, ultra critical plants, they are even coming down to 2200. So I think there is an opportunity for us to move ahead and leapfrog in terms of technology, rather than looking back and trying to modify and renovate some of these old plants. They consume huge amount of coal. For the same amount of coal, we can produce nearly 1.4 to 1.5 times the generation. So I think what Minister Piyush Goyal ji is saying is something which is very relevant, and we feel very strongly that in the future these plants have to be shut down, and the new plants which have been set up and are not being utilized, space for them will be created.
Okay, I'm going across to Mr. Shakti Sinha ji. In a recent interaction, Mr. Piyush Goyal said, okay, I will not give permissions to renovation or upgradation of these old plants, but now states have to ensure that they actually shut down these plants. Now, central government, there is intent. He said it that when you got new power plants who give you power cheap, why are you forcing expensive power down the throats of people?
Correct.
Do you think it should be seen from that prism, that it's the people who are eventually paying this high cost of power?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, some of the older stations, as Praveer was mentioning, even have a heat value of 2,800.
Yes.
That's tremendous wastage. When you have a heat rate of 2,800, say, even nearby Badarpur, and you can imagine a huge amount of wastage happening. So the problem with the states is very difficult. One is these plants are owned by them. So even if they run at losses, the states pick up the short-term cost of it. You know? So for the states to actually bite the bullet and shut down these plants and start buying power now from NTPC or from power generator who will demand money, that's where the problem arises. Are the states willing to start paying for the power that they will buy? If they are willing to pay, then they can shut down the old plants. But the old plants, legacy plants, are their plants. Let it run at a loss.
But sir, there is from somebody who's been in the secretariat and handled policy, I would like to ask you, there was a legacy. We had 30-year-old power supply contracts at one point of time. Now power is available for much cheaper.
Yeah.
Should distribution companies be forced to buy power at 5.5 when the market allows them to buy it at 2.5, 3 rupees?
Okay, you have to get a balance here. People have to invest to set up a generating plant, right?
Yes.
So certain promises were made to them. Please come to India, or Indian industry set up power plants. We'll assure you market. So where power agreements are there, before you tear it down,
yes,
and you need to tear it down, I agree. But before you tear it down, please see that his cost has been recovered.
Yes.
Once the cost of investment plus the assured rate of return is there, tear it up, tear up the power purchase agreement,
that's a
go
good
to the
point.
market.
Here I will like to get Mr. Praveer Sinha, who's himself set power plants ground up. Sir, in about 25, 27 years, do you think that the cost has been recovered, profits have been made, and it's time to shut down and get these new plants up?
Absolutely right. And I think it's a very relevant point, because in 25 years, all these plants are fully depreciated. So
Yes.
they would have recovered all their financing costs. They would have also got the return on equity based on which the project was set up. And I think 25 years is a very, very long period for all these coal-based plants to be shut down. And I think Mr. Shakti Sinha mentioned about the Badarpur and also the Rajghat plant, which is in Delhi. Rajghat has been shut down, and Badarpur also, they have shut down first 3 units, and they have plans to shut down the another 2 units. Because what we were finding that the cost of these power from these plants were prohibitively high, was in the range of 5 rupees, while we were getting from the exchange and from other supplies, even on long-term basis, at 3 rupees. So I think there is a big opportunity for the country to leapfrog by shutting down these old plants, using new plants which have been set up in last couple of years, use renewable energy to focus for the future requirement of power, and not get bogged down by these old plants have to be run because we'll have a shortage of power. And
but Mr. Praveer Sinha, I'll give you 2 scenarios and would like your comment on it. A, you've got 70,000 megawatts of capacity which can be fired up in say 0 to 60 days or 80 days. That is one scenario. Second scenario is you've got 40,000 of old megawatt of old plants which produce power at high prices. A, inefficient anyways. B, third, C, they also are highly polluting. Now, what is the rationale to have this 40,000 megawatt of power plants on while keeping this 70,000 megawatt on which financing cost to the tune of 1.5 lakh crores or more has been invested? Sometimes 3 lakh crores also if you consider the whole standard capacity. So much of money, which is the public money. State governments have financed these projects. Do you think the seriousness is much more than what it is talked about till now? I mean, it is an alarming situation, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is an alarming situation, and we have ourselves been taking it up with both Ministry of Power and CERC that there should be a sunset clause in these PPAs. Unfortunately, many of these PPAs had conditions that till the life of the plant you can continue to supply power, and these PPAs are take or pay obligations and you are not able to come out of them. So there is an issue, and I think the regulator and the government have to take a serious look at it, take a practical look at it in terms of what is the cost at which power is being supplied, and the alternatives which are being offered are much more attractive than the solutions that we have presently.
Okay. I'm going across to Mr. Shakti Sinha. Sir, I would like to ask you this. The PPAs, Kerala had a PPA which was a fairly long-term PPA that happened about, I think, 2014. After that, states have been reluctant to come with what you call as long-term PPAs. You got medium-term PPAs. It's being bidded on websites. Websites have come up recently. All this is happening. What happened to people who are stranded with 30-year-old PPAs when the cost of new power is down? Do you think they continue to suffer for next 30 years? Or because government is bringing in a range of reforms where you're auctioning everything? So do you think this also needs to be taken in that perspective, and they should be allowed to migrate to lower price of power?
Absolutely. As I said, once you have done the recovery, cost recovery has been done for the investments made,
yes,
then there is no reason to continue the PPA.
Yes.
Because ultimately you have to look at business logic. Now many of these old plants, incidentally, in addition, because of their agreements or locations, are getting very good quality coal.
Yes.
So you're getting good quality coal, you're using it in an inefficient plant, and while you have an efficient plant sitting, getting bad coal.
Yes.
High ash coal.
Yes.
So I think in every which way you look at it, the time has come for these now old plants to be either mothballed or for the PPAs to be torn up. Let the investors, if they look at a plant, they feel there is a need, it can be revamped, certain changes, investments made to make it efficient, fine, go ahead with it. Otherwise, like everything else, once the asset is depreciated, don't flog it beyond the point. because it
Do
becomes
you think
uneconomical.
government can help with regards to a policy decision on this? Because otherwise what we see is a lot of litigation. It's the easiest thing to do in India. Anybody goes to court and the whole projects, I mean, we have seen instances where it take 20 months to get an order from CERC. The
Correct.
interest cost of a project go beyond control. So I think, in India it gets tough in that sense.
Government becomes more dicey in the sense that this is a commercial agreement between two entities.
Yes.
One of whom may be government owned, but the distribution company could be government owned, the generator could be private, or vice versa. So where the government itself is a stakeholder, it can take a rational, practical view.
Okay.
But I'm also afraid of paralysis in the decision making within government.
Yes.
And I'm not, the sense of the person concerned, the officer concerned, who's prepared to write on file ki yes, though we have a valid PPA, we should tear up the piece of paper.
Yes.
Tomorrow somebody can easily make a claim that he took bribes from a private generator to do that and therefore should be prosecuted.
So you mean that is an issue. So a very pertinent point raised by Mr. Shakti Sinha. But given the kind of situation that we are in, anyways, we are also out of time. So we also take closing comments now. I'm taking closing comment from Mr. Praveer Sinha and then Mr. Shakti Sinha. Yes, Mr. Sinha.
Well, if we do not come out of these old PPAs, it would be very difficult for us to meet the renewable targets that we are setting for ourselves. If today we continue to have this much of power which was signed 20 years back or 25 years back, then where is the space for us to go and buy renewable power? Where is the space for us to go and meet the RPO obligation? So these are questions which cannot be brushed aside. They cannot be left unattended. And I think government in its own wisdom and the regulators in their own wisdom need to decide on that.
Okay. Mr. Shakti Sinha, very quickly your closing comment.
Our India's per capita income is about $2,000. So we are still at the lower end of the spectrum, though massive changes are happening in India. I cannot understand how a country of India's size and per capita income can use its assets inefficiently.
Yes.
These plants are inefficient, have outlived their life. Close it down.
A good comment coming from Mr. Shakti Sinha. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on today's discussion. So, there seems to be an industry-wide consensus that old power plants which are inefficient, polluting and produce power at high cost need to be shut down, and around 70,000 megawatts of new capacity which is lying stranded needs to be fired up as soon as possible. Now, the government has cleared its intentions that it would like to see the new capacity to go on stream. How and when this will happen remains a question. We will see if things change in the coming months, but we'll continue to track it for you on News World India. Thank you so much for joining us on today's discussion on Business India. Thank you.